Greetings, YouTube. You know, recently I've been discussing a campaign idea I've been referring to as the 12 races. It's pretty much just a thought experiment at this time, but it keeps me entertained. Those nights at work can be awfully long and dull. So I thought myself thinking about languages. Now, in most traditional fantasy settings, non-human races, the dwarves, the elves, halflings, what have you, all have a racial language of their own. So do the giants, the dragons, yada yada yada. And no one seems to think about this at all. It's not an issue. All dwarves speak the same language. All elves speak the same language. Dragonlance had different elven languages. I don't know of any other settings that had different languages for the non-humans, but I could be wrong. I'm sure that people will correct me in the comments. But the humans always have a diversity of languages, just like we do out here in the real world. And that kind of makes sense. The humans are in the game for us to identify with them because we're all people, we're all humans. And it's trying to reflect the reality of our world in a simplified form because the game usually have like maybe a maximum of like 20 or 30 languages. Because you can't have the full diversity. It would basically be too mind-numbing because there's hundreds, thousands of languages in the real world. But in D&D or Pathfinder, that's a lot of skill. That's a skill tax in a big, fat, hairy way. And it also shows a human-centric campaign model. And I'm trying to move away from that with 12 Races campaign idea. I want the humans just to be one amongst many. Humans are not special little snowflakes in this setting. So I've decided to completely scrap realistic language models for humans. They're going to speak human. There will be 12 races. There will be 12 racial languages. And if anyone says, well, how come all humans speak the same language? I'm going to say, because the gods want it that way. And in a fantasy setting, that can work. Now, you're still going to need a language for people to communicate with each other across cultural lines, racial lines. And I don't want to use common, because common is often pretty much just human language that's become so ubiquitous, everyone uses it as a lingua franca. So I want to use something called the trade tongue. And the trade tongue is designed strictly as a business language. It's a very small vocabulary, about 2,400 words. Nobody has to spend ranks into getting it. Everybody speaks trade tongue, unless you live in a completely isolated community. And it's only good for buying and selling, finding lodging, food, and prostitutes. That's it. You cannot debate philosophy. You cannot discuss religion and magic in it. It just won't work. And if somebody tries doing certain things like bluffing or diplomacy checks while using through the trade tongue, there are going to be huge penalties. And some things just simply won't work. You're trying to convert someone to your religion. You're using trade tongue. They're not going to understand what you're talking about. And they're probably going to ignore you or just get pissed. So that would eliminate the need for common, which is good. Now, some other things I want to do is I want to eliminate the Druid language. I have never understood, why does a class need a language? What the heck are Druids saying to each other that they need to be so secretive that they have a language of their own? Makes no sense to me. Now, all Druids have one thing in common. They are tied to nature in some way, shape, or form, and even amongst all the different variations of Druids there are. So, at first level, Druids will get Sylvan, the language of nature. It's the language of the old forests, of the satyrs and the nymphs and the fairies and the treants and the unicorns and everybody else. That's the language of the natural races. That will be the language that Druids speak. It's still going to mean that almost no one's going to know what they're talking about, but it means that they can talk to all these natural type races as an extension of their training. So I kind of like that idea. There are still going to be the other languages, all the elemental languages, infernal, celestial. So those standard languages that come with the 3.5 or the Pathfinder are still going to exist. So there's still going to be a huge number of languages to learn. But by paring down the human languages to one, I'm hopefully going to be alleviating some of the feat tax off of the players. And I also like the simplicity of it. Every race gets one language, and that's it. I like it. It's nice and simple. 12 gods, 12 races, 12 languages. Simplicity is sometimes a wonderful thing. So, tell me, what have you done in your campaigns in the past or the present that have used languages in an interesting way.